Hello, I am Scott Herbst. I'm founder and president of Six Flex Training and Consulting, and you are listening to The Flex, a podcast where I have conversations with people who are expressing their leadership with the intention that it open access to you expressing yours. Today on the show, I am really excited to introduce you to Dr. Jen Bonow. Jen is, aside from being the managing partner and CEO of the Learning Consultants, they're an agency that does clinic-based treatment and parent coaching in Nevada. Jen is an old friend from graduate school, and I've actually, I've talked to you a lot about your business and your life, and but I've never actually heard how you started your business and what had you go this route versus any of the other number of routes you can take. And so I'm really excited that you're here, and thanks for being here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. That's gonna be fun, I hope. I think.
Pleasure. We have a say. So let's have it be fun. Where I always start these things is tell our listeners, tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, I know some of that, but like what got you into behavior analysis? What had you start your own business? And then we'll let it unfold from there.
Yeah. Well, as you said, we're friends from graduate school, and that's because the reason I ended up at graduate school at UNR is because I was studying as an undergraduate at UNR, and I had a job providing respite care um, to families, right? And usually if you have respite care, it's because you have a child who has some sort of challenge or special need. And so I was spending time with kids that um, had needs that I was not meeting, and I could recognize that. And I felt like, I should probably learn something about this. And lucky for me, the University of Nevada, Reno had what was called the Early Childhood Autism Program. And I signed up to do my practicum there. I was studying psychology, and I learned what behavior analysis was and how just incredibly impactful we could be with families and kids. And I fell in love with the science. It felt like I always wanted to be a teacher, but it felt like I got to do that with science, which made me really happy. And I just stuck with it. And so I pursued my doctorate in psychology, but in behavior analysis. So, and I stayed at UNR to do that, which was just a really incredible education that I feel so fortunate to have. I think especially now, like when so much can be done online and that sort of thing, I feel like I was so fortunate to be at school with people like you, right? Like we were all together constantly like engaging around this. And I think there's something special about that not everybody has the opportunity to have now.
We had it
Um,
so good.
we really did.
It was really
It was
awesome.
awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it was incredible. Um, and so when I graduated, I moved up to Seattle for a couple of years and learned that I was woefully unprepared to deliver ABA services in the wild, so to speak. And that is not because of anything at the university. It was because my timing on that was right as we were sort of pivoting into the medical model where, all of my experience had been doing this with families who are paying privately for services. Insurance wasn't a part of the equation. And it's just the medical model is a whole different ball game. And so,
What did you find different about that? I'm so curious.
um, there, so when you can just go into a family's home and they're paying for the service privately, you can do what the family needs in order to be successful. You can do what the child needs, you can do what the family needs. And our medical health care system is not set up for that. It's a rehabilitative system, and the work we do is habilitative in nature. And so there's just uh, inherently conflict in that. And so, we want to be holistic in our approach to helping a child and a family, but the having to use particular codes and stay within the confines of
And
those
you're not allowed
codes. And
to do academic stuff, but sometimes academic stuff
that's
is
what they
the stuff that
need.
looks academic is actually gonna, yes.
Yeah. And so it's just it was very different. The way that you have to document what you do is different. What you are allowed to do and not allowed to do is different. And it's a lot easier to just talk to a family and be like, hey, your kid needs this and it's going to cost this versus going through a third party is the insurance company. So learning how to like navigate those systems. And at that time too, the insurance companies also didn't know. They'd been mandated to to provide these benefits, but they didn't know what we do. They still struggle to understand what we do, right? Like most of us see our doctor for 15 minutes a year, right? And like these kids are seeing their behavior analysts for 30 hours a week, which is just it's very, very different than what's normally happening. And so that was a crash course in the real
Were you
world when I was
working
in
for a
Seattle.
company or did you start your own business then?
I accidentally started my own business and didn't really know it. So I was working as a consultant for a company, and so I was contracted, which was a surprise. I actually didn't know that that's what I was getting into. So I'd accepted this job, and then I got there, and they're like, "Oh, you have to have like a business license and do as 1099 contractor,
Yeah.
right?" And I couldn't get out of that because my now ex-husband we were there whether we wanted to be there or not. Like he's a psychologist and he had an internship and this was going to
Yeah.
happen. And I needed a job and Seattle is not an inexpensive place to live. And so I just kind of had to figure it out. So I learned that piece of it of like, okay, here's how you get a business license and here's how you like submit quarterly taxes and like do all of these things that were um again, like just not that's not what you learn at school, right? I mean, business degrees, I assume, learn some amount of that, but that's not what I was learning at school. And so I was working for a company, but as a
Right.
contracted employee. Um, but it was good. Like that part was good because I had some opportunity to have that learning curve that I needed to have around how to do this a little bit differently. But I didn't, that didn't work out. And I actually went to work for a different company um, that was that was doing work with adolescents and families, um, dealing with really severe challenging behavior. Like these kids were at risk of out of home placements.
Hmm.
And that was scary. I had actually applied for that job when I first was moving to Seattle and I had turned it down, which, because you know me personally, you'll know is funny. And I came back around to it. And the reason I turned it down is because I was scared. Like I needed to support my family, and I'd never worked with adolescents. I'd only worked with
Yeah.
young kids. But it turned out to be the best thing I had done after, first was choosing to go to UNR for graduate school, and then taking this job was just a really good decision. And I had the opportunity in that role to not only learn how to work sort of with these other populations that I hadn't before, but I quickly became the clinical director of that organization. And then that organization merged with another one. And soon I was leading an entire behavioral health department. So behavior analysts and psychologists, and I started a preschool and we did all sorts of really cool stuff. And so um, really an opportunity to like develop the leadership skills and the things that get to see kind of like behind the curtain on what it means to like run a business or own a business.
Yeah.
Uh, so so that was awesome. I eventually moved back to Reno, but I stayed in that job, work just remote. I would fly up to Seattle every couple of weeks for a few days, um, and after moving back to Reno, so this is where we kind of get to the learning consultants. A number of friends from graduate school had also returned. So Reno's a bit of a magnet. Once you've been here, it's hard to stay away.
The hidden gem
And
really is. People hear
yeah,
Reno and they think like scuzzy casinos.
Yeah, is not
Totally
what it
available if
is.
you want, but a
Yeah,
lot more than that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great place. And so we were like hanging out and we had this idea that we wanted to start a school, and that's always something I had
Mm.
been passionate about. Um, and so we kind of just started meeting occasionally to talk about that and work on that. It was just a group of us that had gone to school together, and like I said, we're back now. And I was still working in Seattle. Um, and one of my partners, Dr. Carrie Millico, had been working for the state, and we had kind of gotten to the point where like, okay, we'd established uh, a business. We'd established an S corp is really what it is.
Yeah.
In order to, we needed a for-profit arm to sort of fund this nonprofit that was going to be the school. The idea being, we would go in and just on the side do consultation with families, like acute challenges. So
Yeah.
potty training, uh, challenging routines, bedtime, homework, that sort of thing. That was the idea. In and out, side gig, like we all have day jobs. And really just to kind of start building some funding for this thing that we really wanted to do, which was this school. And Dr. Millico had been working for the state, and the state uh, changed their model very quickly with very little notice from employing behavior analysts to requiring behavior analysts to be contracted with the state. And that was problematic because behavior technicians can't be contractors; they have to be employed. And so she was going to sort of lose all these people she had trained, and this was a challenge because it's her livelihood, right? She's supporting her family, this is her job, and she was like, "Hey, we have a business. Can we just I need this. Can we just kind of pull everybody into this business so I can keep these technicians that I've trained, keep these families, like keep this rolling, right?"
Yeah.
To which, of course, we said, "Yes, of course you can do that. Like, it's you need a
Yeah.
livelihood." And so um the learning consultants was now Carrie delivering ABA services, and we had employees. Meanwhile, I'm still working for the company in Seattle, and we were going through some things in that company, like some major audits and things where I was learning really a lot more about this medical model than I had up to that point. And I was like, huh, we should probably get our ducks in a row over here in this thing that we're doing in Reno. And so we started to look at that and kind of build some like policies and procedures. Because again, this was not it was just a thing we were doing. It wasn't like we're going to start a business and we're going to like have a business plan and do all
Yeah.
of this. Um, so we started kind of working on that and like building some structure into that just for liability reason, making sure that we had ourselves covered, and that the employees had what they needed to be safe and have a good employment, and that the learners had what they needed to be receiving quality care. Um, and in the meantime, the job in Seattle sort of winded down, and
Hey, can I ask you a question?
yeah.
I'm really interested because I've done, I think this is probably like the 11th, 10th or 11th recording of this we've done, and I just haven't heard what you just said there, which is a connection between policies and procedures and making sure like clients are getting what they're needing, making sure employees are protected. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't come out in dialogue yet.
Okay.
And I know that's something that business owners struggle with is like it's getting around like you're doing the work, you're doing the work, you're doing the work, and you see a need for processes, procedures, whatever.
Yeah.
Say a little more about that connection you saw. And
Yeah.
I guess as a means of look, no, this is why it's worthwhile to actually buckle down and do that.
Um, this is one of my favorite things. It sounds so nerdy, I know, but I love um the building of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, the a business is not just activity. A business needs structure, in
Hmm.
order to be a thing, right? So like, we can all do activity and earn money, and
Yeah.
that's great. But if you want that to be, if you want what you're doing to be a thing that exists in and of itself, if you were to walk away from it, or if you wanted to go on vacation or whatever, it has to
Yeah.
have a structure to it. And that's your policies and your procedures. Like that's the documentation that says like this is what this business is. And the the most important part of that is the protective parts, right? So when you have when you actually take the time to write down to say like this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it, and this is how we're going to go about doing it, you create a structure in which people can reproduce the thing that you have, that is so special about this business that you've created. That is,
Yeah.
you know, people don't just, people don't even just choose to just work for themselves because it's fun. It's because they, I mean, it can be, but it's also because they don't like how other people are doing it. There's something that I have said is special about how myself and my partners go about delivering this service that sets us apart and makes us different from other people who are doing it, which is why we have to do it on our own inside of this business. Therefore, we need to say what that is and define that. Um, and in doing so, you one like protect your employees, right? So you give them parameters and boundaries um, within which they are doing their work, and you give yourself parameters and boundaries that are the things that you say you're accountable to them for, right? So um, those are your PTO policies and your benefits policies and how you go about handling complaints and grievances and avoiding harassment or handling harassment if it occurs. Like things happen. Having employees is hard work. And so having structure around that can be very helpful for everybody. And then the same thing for your clients. Like it's how you say, we deliver our services in this way and we are, beholden to the code of ethics or whatever else, state laws and rules and regulations. And these are our commitments that we're making to you, and we're writing them down so that we're clear on that. But also, here's the commitments that you're making to us if you're going to be participating in our services. And so having policies around attendance and payment, right? Like you have to pay us. That's really important. Otherwise, the business can't exist. And so you start to build, it can feel really overwhelming. Like I think that you're right. Like people avoid it because it feels like a lot and you don't even know where to start. Um, but you just have to start. You just have to be like, okay, like a lot of times we get a policy out of something that happens that we didn't anticipate, right? So
Yeah.
there's an event, we didn't anticipate it, we didn't know how we should handle it, we did our best, and then we're like, okay, in the future, here's how we handle this thing, and
Yeah.
now you have a policy. Um, does that
Yeah,
answer? Did I
totally. And
get it? What you
I
were?
just want to talk through a little bit more. Because what I'm hearing is a couple things. And what I have heard that I think is familiar with your story from I mean, not just people I've interviewed for this, but people, is that a lot of times how a business unfolds is that a need presents itself and you start doing something to address that need. And then
Mhm.
you discovered like, oh, that need, and you keep doing it, right?
Right.
And kind of build out services from there. And so it's not unusual, a lot of, I think probably great advice for someone who's looking to start a business is look for what's needed and just start filling it, and a business will be there,
Emerge. Yeah.
yeah. Like if you don't know what your grand big vision is yet, not a problem. But I think what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that it's like you meet that need, and then so you don't get overwhelmed by it. You start like building the policies.
Hmm.
And I think like a lesson people could learn from starting a business is like the same thing applies to policies. It's like when you see a need for a policy, well, create it, and then it's
Yeah.
there. And instead of like, oh, I got to have all these policies all at once, not like what are you dealing with now? And
Right.
create a policy and a process for it. And
Yeah.
um and that'll be your foundation.
Yeah. And it's two things there. Like when you start a business, like there are things you have to have from the get-go that I hope that anybody who is thinking about starting a business or is running a business knows. Like you have to know your state laws and federal regulations around how to have a business. And there's sort of a minimum, right? Like if you're going to have employees, you probably have to have workers' comp insurance and liability insurance and these sorts of things. But yeah, a full employee handbook, that might be a down the road sort of like one policy at a time. And then the thing you said, Scott, about a policy and a process, like the policy in and of itself is not sufficient, because at some point you're going to have to implement that policy in some way. And so knowing what that's going to look like, I think is really, um, it's really important to at least think about, at least maybe you didn't. So as an example, just this last week, I built a grievance reporting form for our company. So we have a grievance and complaint policy. We have a process by which we address those. And the way in which a grievance would get into the system was sort of haphazard. Somebody would come to their manager and say the problem, and then it would get documented, and we would follow the steps in our policy, but it was sort of just wherever they happened to write it down. And like, so we have this file of like random things that people have written in different formats and different ways, and so on and so forth. So we've been in business for almost, I don't know, 8 years, something like almost 8.5 years, maybe. Um, I just made this week a form to sort of streamline all of that so that now they can come in a more organized way. And we didn't need that before. We don't get very many. We were small. We didn't have a ton of employees, but as we grow, it's just not sustainable. We need a more efficient way to do that. So that process piece, kind of having an idea of how you'll do the policy is really important too, for
Awesome.
sure. Yeah.
The other thing I want to throw in, just for because this isn't for people who have businesses or starting businesses, I want this to apply to anyone. I think probably if you're looking to develop those skills, you can look at how you manage yourself and
Yeah.
see where there's a need and where you can put things in place to support yourself and your team by way of exactly what you're talking about, policy and practice. And if you start doing that intentionally, you'll actually start building the skills to run a business.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, um, one of the things that I think about a lot when I'm running my business is when we work with kids and families, right? In a way that you can help a family learn to manage their family, help parents learn to manage their family, manage their children's routines and things like that, is by taking the family rules out of sort of the heads of the parents, so to speak, and making them external and explicit, right? So we write them down. And now it's not, you have to turn the TV off because as mom said, you have to turn the TV off. Now it's our family rule is you get 30 minutes of TV. It says it on the paper there. I'm not saying this, the paper's saying this on the wall. And it's been 30 minutes, so now you have to turn it off. And it is a sort of almost magical way of like managing things, because it removes that interpersonal conflict a little bit. It's not a battle between mom and kid. It's mom and kid on the same side. These rules are a real bummer, right? Like kind of thing. And if you sort of just move that over into, it's like it's almost the same idea. It's like I didn't say we can't have a bounce house in the middle of the clinic on a whim because I'm worried the kids are going to get hurt. Our policies say that if we want to do these things, we have to have particular safety measures in place before we do them. So really sorry, employee, but the policy, right? So you kind of get a little bit of that removal, and you're right, you can do the same thing for yourself if you start to say like they're rules, right? It's just rules, right? So um I'm going to do my day according to this structure. And I'm going to look at these parts of my business that are important on these on this schedule, right? And kind of build that into what you're doing. And, some of the rules I have for myself are like my I update my calendar every Friday for the following week and make sure that like it's how it needs to be. So that I have time to work on the things I need to work on. And I have a rule for myself that every time I touch something, a document in our organization, I do something to make it better. So if I opened it because I needed to just review it to get an answer and I see a typo, I fix it. Um, so just like little things like that, or the rule I already said, if there's an event that we weren't prepared for, we didn't have a policy, we write the policy at that time. Like these little rules that sort of put structure in that help you build the business. Yeah. I don't know. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I want to make sure I'm getting what you're saying, and I want to pull some things out because I think they're really valuable. One thing, going back to what you said earlier, you talked about having like you build this business because it's a special thing, but if you want it to grow, you need to get it on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I'm hearing there is that, or what I'm imagining, I don't know if you said this, but I think it fits. Until you do that, the business kind of is you. And
Yes.
uh and so it's actually about having this thing be bigger than just you and your personality and your whims and wants and
Mm-hmm.
desires, and which I think is really smart thing to do, because your wants and whims and desires can change from moment to moment, and if that's how you're making decisions, your um your employees aren't going to be able to expect any consistency.
Right.
And, and that's and then actually getting it on paper. I mean, you mentioned it like um you kind of talked about it like you're protecting yourself, like, hey, it's not me, it's the policy. But I think it also, going back to what I'm seeing, going back to like this actually protects your employees. Like this becomes the bedrock on which you
Mm-hmm.
and which they know exactly what they can and can't expect, and they might not always like it, but knowing to expect that is actually a really powerful thing.
Yes.
um I'm thinking of like gravity doesn't change.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't have to wonder if I step outside my window, if I'm gonna fall. I'm gonna fall.
Right. You will.
Yeah. Because gravity works the same way every time.
Yeah.
And so that's really awesome when I'm like walking upstairs and not floating off into space. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a bummer that I have to like, you know,
Right. We have
uh,
to walk
take the
back down the
stairs
stairs
down
instead of
instead of just like float out my window. But
yeah.
but it really works, and it allows me a lot of just like certainty in how I manage my life. And I'm
Yeah.
seeing that having that consistency and that foundation of integrity in terms of really articulating, here's how we do things, and then
Mm-hmm.
following it,
Yeah.
is really the like the foundation of your business and the day-to-day operations.
Yeah. It really is. And it's good, and it's good for everybody. You're exactly right. Like our employees know they know exactly what to expect, and they to the point where like if they have a question, they know to just go look first because the answer probably exists already, and then they can obviously come to us if they don't. But it is very consistent, which also produces an experience of fairness, right? Like everybody is treated the same. There's not a lot of opportunity for favoritism or exception making, right? Like sometimes you have to make exceptions, and sometimes the policy doesn't fit the situation the way you thought it would, and that sort of thing. But there's a general experience of exactly that. Like they know what to expect. They know it's going to be the same every time. They trust us because we have say-do correspondence between what we say is the thing and what actually happens. And honestly, it takes a massive load off me. Like people ask me questions all the time, as they should, and I can't keep it all in my head. I don't I there's no, it's just not possible to remember every decision that has been made, every um action that has been taken, it's just not possible to remember it all. So you have to write it down. And so it gives me the opportunity to be like, hey, let's go look together. Like this governs me too. Um, it's not just meant to govern all of you, it governs all of us together. And the thing I'm always thinking about inside of that too is how would this, like, the learning consultants is a thing that I care about and have dedicated a significant part of my career to. And it supports my family and it supports 40 other people's families. And it provides services to a large number of families in our area. And if it didn't exist anymore, a lot of people would be affected negatively. And so, what do I need to do to make sure that it can still exist without me? Like, I'm not the thing that makes the learning consultants, and my partners aren't the thing that make the learning consultants anymore, right? We were, but now we're not. And what makes learning consultants the learning consultants is that we have said, here's what it is, and here's how you do it. And if we were not part of that anymore, it could still be that, um, which I think is pretty powerful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, what is I'm going to turn the corner here. What is your next challenge? How you're going to grow? How are you going to grow? Like as a person against what
Yeah.
you're looking to cause as a business. Um, Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me personally, I'm always trying to uh, learn how to the the needs of our employees are the most important thing, right? Like that's what makes us go. And so I'm their needs change over time. It's one of them told me recently that I'm the same age as her mom. Um, like this is a different generation, right? They're very young. They have different needs, and so I'm always trying to sort of learn what we can do to be meeting the needs of people that whose needs are different or who are coming into this with different expectations than I came into my early career with. Um, I think it's a good thing. You know, we were sort of taught you just work, like you just keep trying, you keep doing it, you just work. And if you're killing yourself, that's okay. It's supposed to be hard. And I think that there's some like benefit in having a work ethic that is about perseverance and grit and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, something that I'm seeing that I think is also really good is like we want to live our lives. Um, we don't just want to like kill ourselves working all the time. So we need to be in a work environment that allows us to sort of be who we are, be the whole person, and not it like there's just a different feeling about it. And I think a lot of that, like there was a lot of talk about that in the pandemic, like how people were like, oh, we just realized like life is more than
Yeah.
work. And so like I'm always trying to learn how to sort of balance my perhaps tendencies to put my head down and just sort of like push through with that's not sustainable. That's not what people want. That's not what's going to keep employees, right? Making sure that they have the support and the work environment that's going to work for them and what their needs are now. So that's always it's a challenge, but it's not a challenge because there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different, right? And it's always a challenge to sort of learn how to work inside of that and have different perspective. Um, we are trying to grow, and there's been some challenges around that have, due to like the regulatory environment that we exist inside of, and some of those seem to be easing a little bit, which is awesome, but also scary because it means we might now, you know, we've had big plans and like maybe now we can do them, that's always a little bit scary to be like, oh, now it's time now it's time for the action, right? Like it's
Yeah, I
time,
get it.
there's some risk taking in that. And but we're gonna
Yeah.
do it. We're gonna see what happens.
I'm smiling. It's so familiar to me. I'm like, in the last year or two, there was something where I was like, oh crap, that excuse is gone.
Right.
Here's the good news. I forget what it was now.
Well,
So,
yeah, see, that's good.
you get an excuse. I probably grew into something or whatever, um, and it all worked
It's
out.
always
Yeah,
it
yeah.
always seems
You're
harder,
gonna
and
be
then
fine.
you
You're gonna be
forget,
fine.
right? That
Yeah.
yeah. So that's exciting that we might have some opportunity to put into action some of the things that we've planned and wanted to do. But yeah, also scary. Um, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Uh,
Okay.
all right, we are about running out of time here, so I got two more questions. Um, One, what are you proud of?
Oh gosh. In general or my business?
What's your business? Yeah.
Uh, last week we had a couple of people from the state, from one of our funding sources, come visit the clinic, and I don't always get the opportunity to see it through other people's eyes, and I am incredibly proud of just like these technicians work their butts off, and they are so dedicated to these kids, and uh, they just put everything they have into each interaction. And it's pretty amazing to like walk around and see they're not all happy all of the time, but they generally are, right? And like
Yeah.
happy kids, engaged technicians, like kids who are getting the best out of the people who are here to serve them is just, I'm so proud of my technicians and the work that they're doing. They're not my technicians, the technicians who work for us in the work that they're doing. It's really humbling to have people willing to have an idea and say like, here's what I think we should do, and then have people willing to get on board with that and not just like not just agree to it, but like do it, like have
Yeah.
passion about it and do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Jen, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure. I got to hear your story in a way that I'd never heard it before, so I appreciate that. I appreciate the insights, the exploring these ideas together, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun. We did it.
We did it. Awesome. And to everyone who's listening, thanks for listening. This has been another episode of The Flex, and we will see you back here next time.